Controlled implosion of U.S. continues with government-sponsored violence. Last week, various intelligence agencies confirmed the United States government is in the middle of a controlled implosion that will continue until at least January. Russian intelligence sources say Donald Trump will be the last president of the United States in his present form, and they know from experience how quickly things can change. If this forecast comes to pass, the big question is, will the U.S. be represented by a Khazarian satanic government or a hybrid democracy, meritocracy controlled by the people? The battle over the coming months will be determined that outcome. Many sources agree. Perhaps the most disturbing intelligence that came in last week is the riots in the U.S. are being funded by the Ford Foundation, according to MI6 and NSA sources. Not only that, but Joe Biden and Kamala Harris are on the board of directors and is funded with the U.S. federal grant money. The sources agree. Biden has shown himself to be a totally corrupt Zionist slave. Meanwhile, the fake news smear campaign against Donald Trump is also ramping up by the day, with a full-court press to steal the election by mail-in voting and threats of violence unless Biden wins by a landslide. Americans may not see a confirmed president by next January. The big question is how bad things will have to get before the U.S. military gets off its heavy butt and restores a genuinely representative government to the country. It is a good bet they will only active and when the U.S. people demand that they do so. That they might not be so far off. According to various estimates, as many as 50 million Americans will be facing a hunger crisis by the end of this year. This is not due to a lack of food, but rather to deliberate attempts by the ruling Khazarian mafia cabal to reduce the population. There is in fact, as usual, an overabundance of food in the U.S. However, half of the farm produce in the U.S. is being shipped to China, according to the NSA. In other words, the Khazarian mafia is willing to starve Americans to pay off the debt of China. This is what happened in colonial India when there was a mass starvation because the food was being sent to well-fed England. The crisis is not limited to food because the U.S. is running out of all sorts of items like lumber, light bulbs, and etc. This is only going to get worse as stuff stockpiled in the months before the February the 16th U.S. bankruptcy starts to run out. Skyrocketing crime, criminal local governments, draconian restrictions on private business, and etc. are also driving a continuing exodus from large U.S. cities. At this point, 2 out of 5 New Yorkers want to leave the city. The other thing happening is that the genocidal medical mafia in the U.S. is fighting tooth and nail to continue to poison and rob the American people. According to prestigious medical journal Lancet, the U.S. has by far the most expensive and the worst medical system in the developed world. The situation with the medical mafia is so bizarre now that the new type of palindrome has appeared where the question, who caused the pandemic, is the same as the answer, WHO caused the pandemic. The latest is that agency's long list of crimes against humanity is proof they have been spreading polio in Africa through the use of vaccines. African governments have woken up to the fact that the WHO is a criminal organization and they are kicking them off the continent. That properly explains the perplexing-sounding headline in the New York Post. Scientists can't explain puzzling lack of coronavirus outbreaks in Africa. The corporate propaganda media is obviously in cahoots with the medical mafia. This is seen in their support of Satan-worshipping mayors who are forcing people to wear masks and be terrified of a provably non-existing pandemic. Inside the U.S., the CDC has had its management replaced by military and agency-wide hats and has declared the pandemic over, but you won't hear anything about it on the CNN or read about it in the New York Times. This pandemic is also being rooted out in places like China, Italy, and Japan, and soon will be ended everywhere, Pentagon sources promise. This is part of a major counteroffensive by the White Hats that is being seen in many ways. Pentagon sources say the COVID-19 pandemic was used as cover in Italy to lock down the entire population, while tons of gold, documents, and other valuables were airlifted out of the Vatican. Now, the sources say, Pope Francis has been freed from detention and finally allowed to leave Rome. The sources continue to say, warehouses gold from the Vatican, Vietnam, and elsewhere in Asia is being used to back currencies worldwide, along with natural resources, other assets, and human capital. Brazil has shown what's possible if governments take control of money away from Khazarian bankers. They have radically reduced poverty in just a year simply by making sure the poor have enough money to meet their basic needs. There has also been a widely underreported item of goods news coming out of the UK. Mark Sadwell has been formally replaced by a head of the civil service there. Sadwell was for years the de facto ruler of the UK, while Prime Minister was just buffoon actors. Here's what a senior MI6 source had to say about the situation. We ousted the head of the civil service, Sir MS, as a DVD Dachau double agent, all the cabinet secretaries since I began to look into what the hell was going on with Her Majesty government to be DVD. Dachau German double agents that Rod was taking out. So that, folks, is the backstory to the Brexit, British liberation from Nazi rule. His replacement, Simon Case, was a servant to Duke of Cambridge, Diana's son William or Prince William, the sources say. However, Case will only have half of the power of Sadwell. That is because Boris Johnson chief Brexit advisor David Frost would take Sadwell's job as National Security Advisor. France is next in line for the de facto regime change. Both the MI6 and Pentagon sources agree. Here's what Pentagon sources had to say about the situation. French military intelligence brass, like their US, Italian, German, UK, and Turkish counterparts, know the Israeli nuclear route and may force Zionist stooge Macron to clamp down and may even force him out of serving a foreign power. Also, in the Mediterranean, Turkey has announced Russia is doing naval exercise to send a message to France, Italy, and Greece that Israel will not be allowed to export gas via pipeline. MI6 sources say the situation has reached the point where the French branch of the Rothschild dynasty and the Khazarian mafia want to settle. If this is the case, then we are a lot further on than you may have understood. Intelligence-led campaigns tend to work like that. However, the sources say that it is far too early to be a complacent warning that we are dealing with religious fanaticism essentially, and that is dangerous. I think they want actual blood. The dead cult is just that, human blood sacrifice. Perhaps all warfare is just blood sacrifice. In a sign of just how stubborn and fanatic these people are, last week we saw yet another headline saying Iran is 3 months away from a nuclear weapon. They have been literally saying that for over 30 years. You can't make this stuff up. Now that their pandemic is fizzling out, they are also put out signs they are planning an EMP attack as their next offensive against humanity. The Satanic Department of Homeland Insecurity has signaled this. It might be a good time to make sure you know how to find your loved ones and other important people without having to use a mobile device. It is also a good time to make sure you have something other than electric money available for use in an emergency. In any case, in the US, it's pretty clear the Khazarian mafia has already decided to go with Trump while making Biden a designated dementia loser. Here's what MI6 say in the planet scenario. Trump will stay in office if he doesn't get nuked or shot, etc. All his evils will be swept under a rug and the alternative media will make him out to be a superhero. According to MI6 sources, many years ago a Russian ambassador wife said, "You stupid Americans know nothing. You will have 8 years of a black president, 8 years a white Christian president, then your next president will destroy America." Things may be unfolded faster than the Russian predicted since, according to NSA, US GDP has now dropped to $8 trillion, or less than a third that of China. There are now 80 million unemployed Americans, making the situation far worse than during the Great Depressions of 1930s. An article in The Atlantic claims the US military brass is thoroughly fed up with Trump and is preparing the way for a post-Trump interim military government to restore sanity to the U.S. Here are some excerpts. Trump said, "Why should I go to that cemetery? It's filled with losers." In a separate conversation on the same trip, Trump referred to the more than 800 Marines who lost their life at Belleau Wood as suckers for getting killed. He can't frame the idea of doing something for someone other than himself, said one of the General John Kelly's friends, a retired four-star general. "When I joined the military some 50 years ago, I swore an oath to support and defend the Constitution," James Mattis wrote. "Never did I dream that troops taking that same oath would be ordered under any circumstances to violate the constitutional rights of their own fellow citizens, much less to provide a bizarre photo op for the elected command-in-chief with military leadership standing alongside." In any case, it's clear from the contradictory comments and predictions of various sources that the power struggle in any way in the outcome is yet to be determined. However, outside the U.S., the consensus is the whole fake Democrat versus Republican reality show need to be cancelled. The corporate propaganda service AP has shown growing cognitive dissonance among the remaining brain worshipper by describing dueling versions of reality at war. What this coup drinkers failed to realize is that the Kazarian Mafia's global psy-op is intent on demonizing reality. When this shit show finally ends, the world can embark on the more constructive path for humanity.